Whether you're conquering professional exams or personal milestones, we welcome you to Beyond Clean's Confidence Certification, the 52-week test prep podcast series. With expert insights, actionable tips, and engaging discussions, we'll break down the toughest concepts in sterile processing and build your confidence every step of the way. Join host Cruz as she embarks on a mission to help you not just prep for tests, but craft your success story. And now your host, Cruz.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Confidence Certification, a 52-week test prep podcast series to equip you to take your sterile processing career to the next level. I'm your host, Cruz, and on this episode, we are going to be bringing on two very special guests to talk all about what? Money. Because what is it a conversation about test prep without money? I believe I affectionately started last week's episode with cash rules everything around me, and we still can't navigate away from that point. If you didn't get a chance to listen to last week's episode, go ahead and hit a pause in this and go check out episode 36. Now, this episode's important as a precursor to today's conversation because I talk a lot about leveraging the realities or raising empathy for the spaces of finances in our test prep studies. I think that it's very important that we recognize certain financial privileges that we may or may not be experiencing as we prepare to study and take our tests. Sometimes even the opportunity to borrow money for the certification test is a privilege in itself, which is something that I was able to exercise freely because the good old Nana Bank hooked up Sarah B. Watrous at the time, affectionately now known as Sarah B. Cruz. And really, I think just being able to borrow money from my Nana was a huge favor and a privilege that I think goes unnoticed, as well as the ability to just roll your eyes at a $140, previously $125 test fee. So today we're actually going to get into some tools for our tool belt that you all can leave with actionable steps, real tangible, successful giveaways. And today I'm going to be welcoming Matthew Richardson and Robby Miller. Hey guys, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know, I'm stoked. I love this virtual platform. It kind of puts us all in the same room. And it's too bad that our listeners can't see us because the facial interaction that goes on when we say certain things is it's always a good time. Yeah, on this platform. I digress. You know, I invited Matthew and Robby on today because they can speak to different financial aspects, different money tips and tricks from their own perspective. So, you know, Matthew, maybe you can regale us with a little bit about your own perspective on finances. But first, how long have you been in sterile processing and when did you first get certified?
So I've been in sterile processing a few years. I obtained all 4 certifications within my first year of employment as a sterile processing tech. So that's a little bit about the certification. But as far as the financial question, what aspect would you like to know more about?
Oh, man. See, look, he's got a lot of different aspects. I like that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm wondering what type of information do you think you can give that would be the most impactful to our test takers today? What can they be ready to hear about?
That's right. Yeah. So I guess if you're talking about personally obtaining your certification and the financial implications of that, I think, you know, you have the foreseen cost, which you can plan for, right? The $140 certification. I think some of the barriers that come along for a lot of people is that's not the only loss they need to be ready to incur as they engage, because a lot of people they're relying on overtime, they're relying on a second job. And so you have to budget for those hours as well, whether it be 20 hours, 60 hours, you know, it just depends on the learning curve for you. So I would recommend that you calculate how many hours you think you're going to need to study for the certification. 16 chapters, break it down, you know, and then evaluate what your financial loss will be during that time.
Oh man, that is awesome. You guys, Matthew is coming out swinging. Okay. So we're not even 10 minutes into the episode and you're already leaving with an equation. And what isn't a episode about finances if we don't include math? Am I right? And and I like to know that you got your certifications, all 4 of them in the first year. So I think that speaks a lot to your own integrity and drive to achieve these professional aspects that are important to you. And I think that's awesome. And I want to touch base with our special guest, Robby, as well. Now, Robby, maybe you can speak a little bit to the type of insight that you're going to provide. But first, what was it like getting your first CRCST certification?
Yeah, so Sarah, I've been in really this industry for 20 plus years now.
Wow.
I won't go too deep, but I first achieved my CRCST in 2006. And unlike, others that I'm aware of, I did it on my first time. I was very fortunate to pass that test the first time I took it. I studied hard for it, though, to prepare myself for that exam, and since then have achieved all 4 of the certifications through HSPA myself. And as a leader, as an SPD manager here in the Common Spirit Health System, I really would like to help, our listeners truly understand how they can leverage their organization and their leadership to help them achieve certification and those professional goals that they have.
That is really interesting because, a lot of the times out here, we're just kind of thinking we're by ourselves, right? Especially when you're doing a self-study approach, it's like you almost get the horse blinders where you're like tunnel visioned right into this book, even though you kind of want to like rip your eyes out when you read decon chat, especially when you kind of want to just turn the blind eye when you're reading the decontamination chapter. But I think that is really insightful. And I'm wondering, how do you think leveraging your healthcare system is going to translate into a personal budget for our listeners?
Well, without a doubt, our personal budget is not a whole lot unlike a hospital's budget. And oftentimes, if you just talk to your leader, you'll actually find out that there is a budget to help staff achieve those professional goals, which not only help you as an individual and your development within the organization, but ultimately it transitions in helping the organization itself. So it's about being able to access that information and understanding who to talk to in order to assist you in getting certified. And I think many of you would find out that your organization is more than willing to help you get certified if you're willing to take the necessary steps to do so.
It's almost like you have to make a value statement, especially with the annual HSPA conference coming up. A lot of the times when we are propositioning our healthcare facilities, our department, our managers, you're a manager, your love language probably SBAR or a good Excel spreadsheet. No offense, Robby, I'm not trying to throw any shade here, but this is a finance episode. It wouldn't be one without Excel being mentioned, right? But
or sheets.
Or sheets, yes.
Or sheets.
But when you create these value letters or demonstrate the value grab and the return on the investment that the healthcare facility can have by investing in you, that's a very insightful way to go about making sure that you can even just give your point of view and maybe even make your argument. I know that Matthew has a lot of tips and tricks. Just, I think it's called you have 3 steps or 3 options, right, Matthew, for some practical action guides we can take?
That's right. Yeah, I think at least 3. And Robby mentioned one so helpfully, and that's leverage your facility and the resources they're willing to extend for your certification. I think the other 2 just depend on circumstance and comfort level. Like for me, I did a little bit of both of these. I worked an extra job on the weekend to obtain additional funds. I was exhausted. It was a very tiring point of my life. And then the second is, and this will, pertain to what your credit situation is, but I actually leveraged a 0% interest credit card for 12 months interest free that I used for about 2 weeks of bills that I paid off subsequently on future pay raises. So that, that just depends on your financial guru that you like to listen to and where they fall on credit card debt. But I like to use it for positions like that.
Oh, that's so insightful. Just really quick, guys, remember that we are not financial advisors. We are not bookkeepers. We are not accountants. And we certainly do not have PhDs in calculus and trigonometry. Am I right? But I digress. What we're trying to do is that we're 3 sterile processing professionals. 2 of us have some really great insight on financial aspects, not including your girl, Sarah B. Cruz. But, we're just trying to offer some insight into what we did and what may or may not work for you. So let that sit with you. And when we come back after a word from our sponsor, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be broke in sterile processing. We'll be right back. It's time for our mid-episode confidence boost, where we focus on a key sterile processing test concept. Now, there's no guarantee these concepts will be on the test that you take, but they are key concepts to the workplace and are discussed in the literature. Today, we'll cover types of patient care equipment. Now, we already talked about what patient care equipment was, so make sure you're listening to every episode so you can catch all the mid-session confidence boosts throughout the podcast series. Today, let's speak a little bit to the different types of patient care equipment you might find in the hospital or that you might disinfect in your sterile processing department and decontamination. There is an infusion pump, and they're used to administer fluids and medications. Feeding pumps are used to administer tube feedings. Your hypo/hyperthermia machines are used to cool down or warm up a patient's body. You have heat therapy machines, which are water-filled heating pads. You have your Emerson pumps, which are used to provide drainage of the chest cavity. Ooh, that's pretty cool. And then you have your PCA pumps, your patient-controlled anesthesia, to permit the patients to control their own pain medication. Don't forget about suction machines, which are oral continuous suction used with a suction catheter to remove fluids from the mouth, throat, and bronchial tubes. You have your CPMs, which are your continuous passive motion machines, and then you have your SCDs, which are your sequential compression stockings. This doesn't cover everything, but they are just a few. That's going to wrap this week's mid-session confidence boost. Good luck. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks for joining me and our special guests, Matthew and Robby. We are talking all about money. I mean, because what isn't a day without the almighty dollar being mentioned? Am I right? And don't forget that although healthcare is a compassion field, it is definitely a corporate business. We live in a capitalist-based society, and money is ins and outs, and we all know that sterile processing has been charged with being a no-revenue department. But we're essentially like the kids that live in the basement of our parents' house because we just charge everything on the OR's budget. Robby, did I get that right? Does that sound about right?
I would say you've got it almost right. There's actually some SPDs now that are becoming revenue generating, which is really, really exciting. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We do work within a department that is generally a non-revenue generating department, meaning we don't make any money. We are a pure expense to the organization. But luckily, we work for the ATM of the facility, the operating room, right? So, but yeah, some of us are starting to generate money, and the reality is, the dollars are not infinite in a hospital, right? We only have so much money, and although sometimes it can feel like, there's always more to give, we are running a business, right?
That's right. And, speaking of becoming a revenue generating department, how can we make our sterile processing professionals listening in today or our test takers some revenue generating individuals? Okay, guys, I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to be broke in sterile processing. Me personally, being broke means that I have a hard time affording the day-to-day requirements without even affording the luxuries or, the extras, so I like to call it. And a lot of the times when you're so broke, the requirements or the necessities, you start to look at even some of the necessities as luxuries. You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, I have to go grocery shopping. I have this much money, but the struggle's real. So instead of, $100, I only have 70. So it's like you try to pick from the necessities and turn them into luxuries. So it's all about trying to make that dollar balance. Well, that's broke to me anyways. I mean, Matthew, maybe you can elaborate on what broke looks like more on your end. And gosh, I hope you have some helpful tips on how to combat that. So what does being broke look like to you? And what's one or two suggestions you would have to change that mindset?
Yeah, great question. I'll just tell you my approach. So being broke for me when I came into sterile processing as a technician meant that I worked from 8 a.m. to about 11 p.m. daily and on Saturday and sometimes on Sunday, bouncing between two different jobs and studying for the certification course. Getting a little bit of credit card debt in the process because I had a family with 2 kids. And so that was being broke. My approach was to obtain as many certifications as possible so that I could leverage them for job advancement and pay raises, which I was able to do. And I believe a lot of people are able to do as they obtain that recognition.
I love that. That's awesome because that's very much a cause and effect type of solution, which I love. So here's the cause, and kudos to you for doing all of that with a family. At the time I was experiencing broke and I wasn't, married and I didn't have a child at the time either. I was broke by myself, thank goodness, but I was doing the broke thing solo, you know what I mean? So, but I think that's awesome that you pointed out a very realistic aspect that I think a lot of us forget about is a lot of professionals or people wanting to become certified sterile processing professionals have families. I know when I first joined sterile processing, it was because I needed health insurance. I was turning of a certain age, which we won't say, and I was going to be removed from my parents' health insurance. And even though I went to sterile processing to get better at my vet tech job, I later found out that human medicine needed sterile processing professionals. And I went to a healthcare facility that has, in my opinion, healthcare has some of the best health insurance, in my own opinion. But, Robby, you work in a healthcare facility, so you're experiencing the amazingness of their health insurance plan, I'm sure. But at the same time, you have to pay into that health insurance plan. So even when you're in a facility and you're working the sterile processing job, it still can be a little financially tough, right?
Well, absolutely. And I think when we talk about being broke, I see it on 2 fronts. One, it's a real struggle for a lot of frontline staff who are trying to get certified, even have become certified or earlier in their careers and are trying to figure out how to navigate the economy we're living in today, right? And so I think, certification for me and I experience this personally, but for my staff as well, is one of those first steps that you can take into actually influencing change for the better. But on the flip side of that, as a leader now, there's also being broke as an organization, being broke as a department. And I think everybody within the sterile processing profession needs to be mindful that, again, we are operating a business and we need to be good stewards of resources within our department, because there are in turn benefits that we can receive individually, such as support in getting certification or achieving professional goals, traveling to go to the HSPA conference that's not in state, those types of things, paid for by your organization because you're doing well financially. And when we're broke as an organization or broke as a department, those things can be negatively impacted, because when you talk about relating this to your personal finances at home, we can cut out some of the discretionary spending at home, but when we're cutting out discretionary spending at work, we still need wrappers. We still need biological indicators. We still got to keep the lights on. And so some of those things like travel or paying for folks' certification or recertification might be some of the things that are considered for cuts for this year or this quarter, because we're not being good stewards of resources within the organization. So it is important that we're all aware of that.
And I think you bring up a really great phrase. Matthew, maybe you can expand upon what this means to you as steward of resources. Break that down into something a little bit more digestible for some of our first-time listeners. What does that What does being a steward of resources mean to you, and how can that help?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you have that on the professional level as far as we have to make good uses of the resources that are allotted to our control in order to be rewarded more. And so oftentimes in the healthcare facility, that looks like productivity metrics, quality metrics, supply waste spend. In the OR, it goes to service line profitability. And so all of those things that we can control, we need to ensure that we're providing them at optimal levels of productivity and quality. So that's what it means, stewarding the facility. Personally, it gets a lot more vast, but the facility, Robby hit the nail on the head there.
And you know what I think of when I think about stewarding, the resources? I think a lot about return on investment. And I had mentioned it a little bit earlier in today's episode, but when you think about it, everything that the facility puts out in you, right? Whether it's onboarding you, orientation, a lot of the times I don't think people realize that healthcare facilities, quote, don't make money off of you until after 6 months to a year that you've been on board, because that whole first 6 months or to a year, you're not really creating any money because you're being trained. You're learning how to acclimate to the best practices, the standards of work, the standard operating procedures. You're acclimating to the department's culture. So while you could have a high productivity, and you could have great quality contributions, the healthcare facility doesn't necessarily see a return on their investment for onboarding you, orientation, getting you on the health insurance, setting up your retirement plan until after some time that you've been an employee, whether you're in a per diem status or a full-time status. And if we take that return on investment ideology, that type of focus, and you put it on what can the healthcare facility get from their investment on you, I think Robby has that insight to tell us a little bit about what is some of the return on investment a healthcare facility can expect to get when they invest on helping you get your certification or going to a conference.
Well, Sarah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you use the term return on investment. And that's exactly what it is when an organization invests in its staff and grows and develops its staff. Guess what? The staff want to stay with that organization. Studies show that when you actually have opportunity to grow within your profession, within your organization, you're more likely to stay with that organization. I think we're all, in some regard, looking for personal and professional growth to be an option and available to us. And so, one, when we have turnover, when staff leave and we have to hire somebody else and train somebody else, there is a tremendous loss in productivity. And it's very, very expensive to an organization to onboard and train new staff. Additionally, a lot of organizations, many today, we are marketing ourselves within the industry to get patients to come receive care at our facility in a lot of different ways, such as, say, magnet status. There's a lot of different professional certifications, leapfrog grades, and things out there that organizations market themselves. And one of the ways that they actually get those designations is by demonstrating the competency of their staff, which, you guess it, through professional certification, right? So there is a great value in an organization investing in their employees to grow them in order to retain them. And then ultimately, the best kicker is patient safety. Competent staff results in patient-safe outcomes. And what's more expensive to a healthcare organization than adverse events to patient care? Very, very expensive. So there's a great deal of interest in an organization to develop its staff professionally, and they will help you achieve your professional goals if you ask them.
Right, because I think a lot of people are unaware, and if you're studying, they'll bring this up inside of the first chapters when they talk about different, regulatory bodies. But, Medicaid, Medicare won't cover surgical site infection revision surgery. If you get a nosocomial or a hospital-acquired infection, HAI, right, the insurance companies won't cover that cost. So if you're ever setting up for a total knee revision and it's at the result of a surgical site infection, I know you're probably already angry because you've got 3 case carts of instrumentation and 2 of those are probably revision sets. And I'm sorry you have to pick all of them up, and hopefully they're all under 25 pounds. But that is actually coming out of the pocket of the healthcare facility, the OR ATM, dare I say, not our pocket, but from the OR themselves. So, I think if you're listening to today's episode, take a pause. Start it from the beginning, because a lot of the information that Robby is sharing is your value letter that you could write for your facility, especially when Matthew pointed out that this is a huge financial aspect and a gain for you in affording your sterile processing certification tests. And at the beginning of our episode, Matthew was actually alluding to some type of equation where he was saying that you have to take how long you're going to study minus how much the test costs. And Matthew, maybe you can give us can you expand upon that equation? Because I'm trying to figure out how we can create a practical guide for determining how much a sterile processing professional should save, in our opinion.
That's right. Yeah, I think you'll have to forgive my nerdiness. I plan everything in minutes, hours, and how many dollars it's going to cost me.
Listen, we love nerds here, Matthew.
Very good.
Okay, we have a soft spot for everybody. Fix your glasses if you're listening, and if you don't have glasses, you can pretend, because you're welcomed.
That's right.
Please continue.
Yeah. So it's just, recognizing that some people may work overtime. They may work 2 jobs, and, you just really have to look seriously at how many hours it's going to take you to study for this exam. And then you have to really look at what work am I missing, or where am I getting those hours from? So once you associate how many hours it's going to take you, put the amount of money that you're missing in those hours and add that into your budget. Maybe you're missing $2,000 total pay. Maybe you're missing $4,000 total pay. And then you factor that into, however you're going to save that for that time of which you're getting your certification, or maybe you're switching a workday or whatever it is. I could provide listeners a spreadsheet with those calculations, but it's really just how many hours am I missing and what work am I missing as a result? And that should be factored into what your total spend is for the certification. But if I might add, please add a ROI to that of the subsequent raises that you'll get, and then add up your return on investment.
I mean, you don't have to tempt me with a downloadable sheet. I'm all for it, especially when it's plug and play and it automatically changes all the numbers. It makes me feel so smart because I'm not finding those percentages or averages. But look, here they are. I did a thing,
Very good.
No, I think that's, and that's what it's all about. I think that another aspect is that the professionals studying for these tests, and even if you aren't in the field yet, how much money would you give yourself as an hourly rate without even a job? Like, let alone you're in salary negotiation. That's a whole other thing that I'm sure Robby can talk about in a whole other episode for like 7 hours, is salary negotiation. You know what I mean? But at the same time, how much is one of your hours worth? Truly, if you are only valuing your time at a certain amount, I want you to triple it. Okay, because we never value the time that we have, or the time that we put in, or the time that we take away from the different things we want to be doing, need to be doing, and should be doing to do the things we have to do. So as we move into the end of this episode, I hope you all found some amazing nuggets from today's show. I know there were tons of actionable tips. We had some equations, we had value letters, we had different insights on what could be a possible way to go about saving money. But y'all have homework to do. I know you guys thought because I had my friends over that we wouldn't give any out today. You're wrong. And instead, I'm actually going to make them the bad guys. Robby, maybe you can assign what's a homework or a thought-provoking question that you can give our listeners today?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a 2-part piece of homework here to our listeners today. First, we're talking about money, dollars, finances, right? It's time to start budgeting for that test, right? It's $140 per certification. Maybe you're going for that CRCST. Maybe you have that one and you want this CER, the CIS. or that coveted CHL because you want to grow in your profession. It's really applicable to anybody, but it is time to start budgeting for that. So I know, Sarah, you've talked a lot about SMART goals in your episodes, and it's time to set another SMART goal and really identify a timeline for when you're going to take that test. And let's start saving some of that discretionary money, maybe one less trip to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks for that coffee and tucking that $5 away, but saving, a few dollars a paycheck in order to prepare for that certification. And then the second part of that is go sit down and talk to your leader. If you are employed, ask the question of your leader. What policies do we have in place to support our professional growth, professional certification by our organization? You would be surprised that there are oftentimes policies that we will pay for your certification, we'll reimburse you if you pass the exam, we'll pay for a reimbursement of keeping your certification annually, that type of thing. And then ask, what are the steps that you need to do in order to accomplish that? Does it start with a letter that I need to write that letter to you? Or is it a policy that you can help me with? But go have that conversation with your leader now so that you know exactly what options are available to you.
And don't do that while they're on the floor on Monday morning trying to do IUSS because a one-of-a-kind instrument dropped on the floor and now they're getting yelled at for some reason, wondering why they only have one of them. Okay. If you're going to have that conversation, set some time aside and not while they're eating lunch. That's not cool either. Okay. So managers deserve to eat too, just like sterile processing professionals. So make sure that you have that time aside. Try to set a meeting. You can meet up with them and just say, hey, can we put aside about 10 or 15 minutes to talk about some opportunities I'd like to, discuss with you, or some certification questions that I have. Little snippet. Don't catch them off guard. And definitely don't go up to them and say, hey, we need to talk. I'll talk to you at this time for 15 minutes. That's not a good look either. Now your manager is super anxious. Okay. That's not cool. But, definitely set up some time. Those are really great homework assignments. Matthew, what do you have for our listeners today?
Yeah. So I've got one professional, one just personal. The first one, professional, is don't underestimate the value of a preparation course or the workbook that goes with the book. It cements different types of learning. When someone explains a concept to you through a course, when you have to rehash the information that you've read in a workbook, it expedites and enhances your learning experience. So do not miss out on those opportunities. Do not underestimate them. There's scholarship opportunities for things like that. Don't miss out on those. Inquire about those. And the second one is professional, and I think we've talked a lot about being broke. We've talked a lot about how hard it is, and we all know it. We all know the struggle of being underpaid for the work that we do. So my question in that is what is growth worth to you? What is personal growth worth to you? Because it's not going to get any easier without professional development, and so you have to engage in the hard work of growth, whatever that means, whatever it looks like for you. Maybe it's something completely different, but you have to engage in that work, and it's not going to get any easier without it. So just engage of the good, hard work of progress.
These were such good homework assignments. And, despite the fact that there are 4 thought-probing and provoking ideas that they could work with, I think that they are all genuine and can really serve a purpose in their own areas. I don't think any of the homework assignments you all gave overlapped each other at all. This was such a phenomenal episode and such a real life concern that a lot of our test takers have that usually stop them before they even leave the gate. And, Matthew, Robby, thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, everybody, that's going to wrap today's episode. Be sure to come back for next week, though, because we're continuing the money trend and we're going to be talking about the power of percentages and how knowing how much to study will help you in the long run. See you then, everyone. Bye. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. For more sterile processing education and resources, make sure to visit beyondclean.net or follow Beyond Clean on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out over 1,000 SPD-related videos at youtube.com/beyondclean. If you have any questions or comments for the show, you can reach out to info@beyondclean.net. Finally, make sure to download the Beyond Clean mobile app on the Apple and Android app stores so that you don't miss a future episode of any of the other awesome Beyond Clean podcasts. My name's Cruz, and you've been listening to Confidence Certification. Until next time, keep fighting dirty and pass that test with confidence.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast series are of Sarah B. Cruz only and do not represent the companies she works for or collaborates with.